Hi guys, welcome to a new episode of Untempered. Today is an exceptionally unique day because I'm sharing things I've never fully shared before. And I have the pleasure to sit down with an expert. I'm so lucky that you're here. Yeah. Sadia Khan is here with us. Today we're going to be discussing childhood trauma and how it affects us. And Sadia, I've actually not even told you this topic. First of all, hi, how are you?
I'm great, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
It's such a pleasure sitting here with you. I feel so honored and very, very lucky to have you here. And it's such a amazing topic to talk about because I feel like we're not really normalizing how much our childhood trauma affects us. So your voice and your incredible advice has been sounded all over the UAE on amazing podcasts and all over social media and
it's
countless places.
Right?
It's everywhere. And it really inspired me because actually the way I actually found you, because obviously we just met, but it was through a reel that really touched, like one of my heartstrings.
One of my first questions to people, especially clients, is what reel made you want to reach out to me?
Yeah.
Do you mind me asking what reel it was?
Yes, of course. It was a reel about you saying why certain people get cheated on and how their upbringing sometimes can be what results in them going into relationships where they're constantly being cheated on.
Right.
And actually that inspired me not only to reach out to you, but also to create this topic because it's a topic that I've always wanted to talk about. And to give you a little bit of a background, because like I said, we just met, I have such a, and this is why I started this podcast as well, because I feel like I'm doing what I would have wanted to hear. I wanted somebody to be talking about things that I constantly was struggling with, but I didn't really have anybody specific to listen to. I didn't feel inspired. So I thought, why don't we sit down and have these deep conversations with incredible people like you and really, really dive deep into trying to make this like inner voice of ours a little bit kinder and more self-aware.
Yeah.
So I've struggled with childhood trauma from both of my parents.
Okay.
And I've had a lot of emotional neglect. And there was a side of also violence and domestic abuse from my father directed towards me and directed towards my mom. My mom was very emotionally disconnected on a lot of ends. And I think maybe if it was her way of coping, she has completely invalidated unvalidated, I don't know the word, but invalidated my emotions whenever it came to me speaking up about the abuse that was going on. And I felt really like what they say, like alone in a big crowded room my whole life. Now, what I want to talk to you about today is I've realized now that I'm 32, how much this is affecting my romantic life.
Yeah.
And not just now, but in the past, I'm now looking back and I'm going through these memories and things of exes and stuff and thinking, oh my God, there's a pattern here. There's something going on.
Yeah.
So my first question to you would be, I feel like we're constantly on a pursuit of trying to figure out why we're having relationships we're having, why we're pursuing these people, why are these people in our lives, good, bad, how are we going to be able to deal with these triggers that they don't even know that they're doing in these relationships. So basically the first question is, how is this going to affect somebody like me? And is it going to stop? Is there a chance to heal, or is it consistent work?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for being so vulnerable. I always come into podcasts kind of expecting a more typical relationship-based podcast, and I'm yearning for this discussion. And so I really appreciate you having the bravery to discuss something so personal. And I get very emotional when I discuss these topics because I know the pain it causes people. And not only does it cause the person so much trauma, but the person that's trying to love them often experiences secondhand trauma from trying to love them as deeply as they can. So having somebody so open about that is a gift for me. So I appreciate you, reaching out and being so vulnerable. And I understand exactly what it's like when you feel like, am I just going to be messed up forever? Just someone tell me now so I know whether I'm going to be forever difficult to love, or is there a way of fixing it? Just tell me so I know. And unfortunately, it's a little bit trickier than just that. So I do have to kind of delve in a little bit to understand what the trauma is, how did it create wounds, what are the triggers, and what your partner is like. Unfortunately, we have to kind of go a little bit deeper. So do you mind me asking how long you've been in a relationship?
Yeah, we've been together for 6 years.
Amazing.
We've been married for married on paper for 3, but after the ceremony it's been a year.
Amazing.
And we have our daughter, she's 2. And we are very different. I'm Lebanese American. I've grown up lost and confused and really on my own ever since I was 15. Oliver, my husband, he is a race car driver. He's had his same passion since he was 9 years old. His parents supported his dreams and have
healthy
always
kind
been
of background for him.
Very healthy background for him.
Praise be to God. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think actually I feel so guilty saying that, but because we are, I feel like sometimes he feels bad that he has a good, trauma-less childhood, and we constantly fight about things, not constantly, but we do fight about things that trigger me where I feel like you don't understand me. You don't get that this hurts me. You don't get that. And he's thinking, I didn't do anything. Like it was something so simple. I talk to everyone like that or you know. So then I do see it when I step out of it after an argument and I think, well, he's right. It probably didn't deserve that reaction. And then I feel self-deprecating, which takes me back to childhood, which I was constantly being told that I wasn't good enough. So I became naturally self-deprecating. But now in this relationship, I'm thinking, how can I send the message and be able to communicate that these are triggers for me without constantly feeling like I'm talking about myself and then bringing him down and you know, that's what's hard is like we are so different.
Of course. And here's the thing. Everybody on paper can be similar. They can like the same things. They can be from the same culture, speak the same language. But how we know we're similar or not is the level of trauma we experienced as a child, because then we know how, if we got similar triggers and if we know how to soothe one another. Now, being traumatized as a child like you were with a combination of abuse, here's the thing. Parents can traumatize you in 2 different ways. One can be active, where they actively abuse you, negative, physical, emotional, actually abuse you. The other can be passive, where they don't give you support and they give you neglect and they don't show concern for your emotion. Both are equally damaging. Both are. So people, when they think of trauma, they think, well, nobody hit me in the house. I can't be that. And I was never sexually abused, so I'm not traumatized. But having a parent watching you in pain and not offering you a hand is trauma. Because what happens then is a child has no one to soothe their emotions. When they're going through pain, they have no one to soothe them. So nobody's there to kind of coddle them. So they then have to do it to themselves and they don't know how to soothe themselves. So they develop coping mechanisms. And what these coping mechanisms tend to look like is very self-sabotaging. What a coping mechanism might be is being incredibly addicted to something. It might be addicted to a person, might be addicted to a feeling, might be addicted to a substance. But it's a way of calming yourself down, but it's false calm. It's not, the pain is still there. And it's how you know the pain is still there is the moment somebody replicates anything that reminds you of either the abuse or the neglect, you react as if they've burnt you alive. You react as if you burnt them alive, and they're going to try and give you water, but you're rejecting it and then blaming them for not saving you. That's what it really feels like when you've been traumatized. And it's really difficult because the person who's been traumatized wants nothing more than love. But because it's so unfamiliar to them, when they get it, they're suspicious of it and they reject it and they test it and they punish the person who's trying to love them unless they meet somebody who's bad for them. When they meet somebody who's bad for them and is also abusive and is also neglectful, this feels familiar. I know how to navigate this person. I'm going to love you with all my heart. But somebody who's consistent, caring and loving, what's wrong with you? Why are you loving me? This can't be real. Let me test you. Let me swear at you. Let me shout at you. Let me pretend to break up with you. Let me test you. But you, the abusive, neglectful, narcissistic kind of partner, you're exactly what the doctor ordered. I know exactly what to do with you, so I'm going to love you endlessly. So the person ends up being very traumatized and re-traumatizing themselves and reincarnating the abuse almost voluntarily. But of course, it's not volunteer. It's all like trauma is like a little puppet master that tells
cycle.
you, what to do. So that's the baseline of trauma.
You literally just defined exactly what I go through. I literally don't know how to let someone love me.
Well, here's what you do know. When you get abused as a child, you develop a core belief. And what that core belief will be is no one loves you, no one cares about you, you're unworthy, and you deserve this. Because this is what a child's going to learn. They're not going to learn, I hate my dad's horrible, my mum's a bitch. They're not going to learn that because we are programmed to love our parents. Whether we like it or not, it's in us, because if we don't love them, we have no one to save us, we die. So we're programmed to love them. When they start abusing us, we don't stop and think, dad's on a substance, mum is just really detached. We think, I'm unlovable, I'm disagreeable, I'm the problem. So we develop this deep down inside of us, and then we go through life looking for people to validate that belief.
Wow.
So we look for somebody who reminds us that we're unlovable, we deserve pain. When we meet somebody who doesn't remind us of that, that's weird, that's uncomfortable. You almost punish them for trying to love you. And they're like, but I love you. I don't understand what. Yeah. And you're there like, you have this trigger and you explode at them. And then afterwards you're like, but this is all I've ever wanted. Why am I punishing my partner? And you're almost then crying, and they're like looking at you like you're bipolar. But it's because you have that inner child that's broken and the adult that wants to be with this healthy relationship.
Right.
And they're constantly battling each other.
Absolutely. You just nailed it right on the head. I mean, that's the exact thing that I've said to myself, and I've written in a journal. It's like, I don't understand what this is. Everything every girl wants. I mean, he is such a great partner and he does support me.
And a great father as well.
And a great father as well. The thing is, the nature of his job, now I feel like I'm in a therapy session.
Please do. This is my favorite part of life, so please do.
The nature of his job is to be away a lot. And for me, that's how I feel. And for a while, I couldn't really say those words because I felt I could hear my mom saying, oh God, all you do is complain. You know, everyone would dream of going to America by themselves and starting their dream. You've always said you love California. Stop moaning. And that's why I never said the words of I was abandoned until I went through therapy. And now I'm okay with saying I survived abandonment
extreme
and
abandonment.
neglect. Right.
Yeah.
So when he leaves, I feel abandoned. So I resent him. Yeah. And then he calls me and he's checking on me all day. He's constantly trying to meet my needs a long distance. But I just feel like I don't like him.
Here's the thing with independence. It only comes when we feel safe. It doesn't come just like that. So what I mean by this is you have a 2-year-old. So this is why it's so beautiful, because you get to see it in live. When your 2-year-old knows you're in the room, she'll probably be running around, playing, kissing people, being absolutely fine. The moment you leave, she gets anxious. Children need to know that they're loved first. Then they can explore the environment. Then they can go out and be independent. But if they're not loved by their parents, they can't be independent. They're constantly looking for codependency because they don't feel safe. So you having an abusive father and a neglectful mother means there's no way you could have enjoyed your independence at 15. It's like matter of death for you at 15. But when you've got really loving and secure, safe parents, you can do anything by yourself. Now, what happens then is when you get into relationships, until you feel safe and secure, you can't calm down. You can't soothe yourself. So, and I have the same problem. I'm super clingy, and with separation, I associate separation with paranoia. I get angry and I get upset, and I need a lot of soothing afterwards. But if I get my soothing, the moment I'm triggered and I get contact and I get relief, I let go. But if it's prolonged periods of no contact and prolonged periods of separation, I self-sabotage as well. So what I'll do is, I'm not calling you. You didn't even think to call me this morning. And I'm causing myself the pain.
Right.
So the key is actually checking in and having rituals. Having check-in rituals, morning, lunch, evening, or it might just be, I know every night we're going to FaceTime before bed. It soothes the anxiety a little bit. But the problem with people like us who are anxious is we want to see that they want the same level of intimacy as we do. We're like, how come you haven't checked in? How come you can sleep without calling me first? You must not love me. But they can do that because they grew up with a knowledge that people that love them come back.
Right.
So it's not that they don't love us and don't miss us. They trust the process. Whereas we associate their independence with they must not love us.
Wow.
So we have to find a mutual ground. You have to learn his independence is not a detachment from you. It's simply because he trusts you and knows he's coming home to you. And your love has made him independent. Whereas for you, that is a signal that you don't love me and need me the way I need you. You go away. But he just has to simply remember that you just need rituals, predictable rituals, and you will calm down.
Wow. Wow, I'm processing right now.
Inshallah. No, it's not easy. It's
Wow.
not easy. It takes a bit of time and it takes a bit of effort, but the abandonment you suffered, and here's the thing with a lot of people who have abusive fathers, what happens is they become then super loyal to the mum and super attached to the mum because they think, okay, this is the one parent that stayed with me. She's going to be super loyal. Chances are she's usually a bit broken as well because only a broken person attaches to an abusive man. So then she lets you down. It's only a matter of time before that mum lets you down, either through the form of a stepdad who's also abusive or in the form of, I can't handle you anymore, can you go do it yourself? So that mother also lets you down. And so the child is thinking, the one parent I thought would save me from my dad is just as bad, but in a different way.
Right.
And so the child goes through life looking for love and having no idea where to find it.
That's, wow. I'm honestly going to cry.
So am I. I really hate these conversations because it makes me so sad. Because, it makes me so sad because you cannot control or predict your childhood, but you can predict the outcomes. And the outcomes, unfortunately, are so traumatic.
And I think this is why I wanted to start this podcast and have these conversations, because although it's super hard and it's bringing so much to the surface, I think there's so many people out there that are like what you said in the beginning, like, am I always going to be fucked up? Nobody loves me. All these the inner voice that you have that's constantly beating you and berating you and basically talking shit to you all day is generated from, it's formed by these, abusive behaviors that were done by our loved ones.
And the people who are supposed to love you. So when the people who have no choice but to love you choose not to, you think, how the hell is a random stranger going to love me?
Exactly.
And the worst thing is, what we do when we're traumatized is we pick bad partners on purpose, because then we can say, well, he was abusive or he was a cheat. We almost deliberately pick the bad partners so then we don't have to do the inner work. But the moment we pick a good, stable, wholesome man, and then we're still acting crazy, that's when the penny drops and you think this must be a me thing, and you start to hate yourself even more, because you're just like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And then whereas when you're in a toxic relationship, it's very easy. You can just say, I'm doing this because he came home late, spoke to another girl, blah blah.
Right.
But when you're in a healthy one, that's when you actually need the most work.
Wow. Isn't it crazy that we always think that we need to do the hard work with relationships that are unhealthy to make them better? But really, actually, if you do the inner work on yourself, you could have a healthy partner, and then you could do the hard work with a healthy relationship, because it makes you better.
A healthy partner is a great template. And this is the hard thing about having a healthy partner when you're anxious, is they actually are a great template because they show you what normal behavior and calm behavior looks like. They model it for you. But at the same time, you almost feel guilty because you're just like, they don't put me through so much stress and I put them through so much stress. Do they even deserve it? They could easily be with someone healthy and not have to love me. Why do you want to love me so bad? I'm so difficult to love.
Yeah.
And so you're conflicted with, I really want this person, but do I deserve this person? So it's easier just to be with a toxic man.
That's so true. And I've chosen many toxic partners. And
what did the toxicity look like previous to Oliver?
Previous to Oliver, the toxicity was somebody who supported addiction for me. So I was addicted I was
a coping mechanism.
Coping mechanism. I was addicted to. So when I was younger and I lived in Saudi Arabia, when my dad would hurt me and my mom would leave, and there was nothing to be addicted to. There was no alcohol, there was no substances. So I was addicted to diving out of my brain. So I would dissociate. Yeah, absolutely. Look outside the window for hours and hours and create my own stories.
Okay, so you would struggle in school.
Yes.
Yeah, because when you live in a chaotic home, what happens is if you can't escape the chaos, the only thing you can do is tune out.
Yeah.
And you can tune out and you can almost look out the window for hours on end, or you can look at your phone for hours on end. Nothing goes in. Right. You can read a book, nothing will go in.
Nothing will go
your
in.
brain won't compute what's going on because it had to, as a survival mechanism, tune out when there's trauma.
Absolutely. Actually, this is really sad, but it's true. And you've just said it, so it's reminded me. I've only been able to actually start reading a book and actually ingest information. Yeah. I would say 4 years ago. I've been with Oliver for 6 years.
Yeah.
And I do find that being with him, actually now when I look back at my life with him, he's made me better in so many ways. So for example, the toxicity with the ex was that if I was feeling down, it's like, who cares? Let's go take a bunch of pills and drink alcohol. We'll do it together. It's fine. We're both high. We're both drunk. And then with Oliver, he is incredibly passionate. He has such a drive. He has no really need to drink or want to drink. He's like, I don't need it. Like, I'm good. I'm happy, you know? And I'm like, what do you mean? And for a while we would fight because I wanted to finish a bottle of wine by myself. And he would keep asking me, are you okay?
Yeah.
What's
because
wrong?
It's a coping.
Exactly. And I'd be like, why are you asking me if I'm okay?
You're
I'm
trying
fine.
to soothe yourself.
Exactly. So that's gone now. And I'm very grateful for my partner for helping me through that. Even though I fought back a lot.
How are your dreams? Do you sleep well? Do you have good dreams?
I have been on Zoloft for ever since I had Callie, so about 2 years now.
Good or bad decision?
Great decision.
Great. I'm really happy to hear that because sometimes I recommend it to clients.
Yes.
And they're terrified. And I understand because I'm not a fan of pharmaceuticals and all of this stuff. I completely agree. But when your trauma is too much, you can't think your way out of it. You literally can't. So I can sit there for hours and I can take their money day and week after week because they don't want to take drugs. But unfortunately, there's only so much I can do. Their brain is traumatized. Their brain is producing neurochemicals that are not calming themselves down. So they can logically understand. But when they get triggered, it's like their body's been set on fire and they don't know how to calm it down. And they'll call me and I'm like, unfortunately, it's but neurological. So sometimes I recommend going to a doctor.
It saved my life.
Especially when you have become a mum.
Absolutely. It saved my life. With postpartum, I would hear Callie cry. My daughter, her name's Callie. And her cries would bring out a specific, as if somebody was pressing play on a button on a tape. And it was me crying as a kid and banging my head on the wall, nobody listening to me or nobody coming to me, and me being in so much pain and that just having to be me dealing with it by myself for hours and hours. So when she would just cry because she's hungry, I just wanted a little milk bottle, I would feel like I was torturing her. And the midwife came to me one day and she was like, are you okay? And I usually, I totally like, under the rug. No, everything's fine, Yeah. And then it bursts in one go. And I told her how I was feeling. And I said, I feeling, suicidal and I was feeling this way. And she recommended that I go see a psychologist and everything. And then when they put me on Zoloft, the reason I brought it up is because I wouldn't sleep before that. Yeah. I would have nightmares. I would see my dad.
PTSD is nightmares.
Yes. Yeah. I would see his body like he's dead and he's in the room. It's horrible nightmares I didn't even want to describe. But Zoloft helped me not just be able to, like you said, that scene in Harry Potter where they go through that maze and it's all closed off. I felt like I was in that my whole life. And finally with Zoloft, I felt like the door opened.
Yeah. And the thing is, people are really against it and stuff. And I completely understand why, because I took it very, very short period for 4 weeks. I was in London. I was not coping well with the change in lifestyle. And I literally had to take something to calm myself down. And what I couldn't believe, because I was only on it for 3-4 weeks and then I came off it. And I couldn't believe I was able to actually think about what's going on right now, rather than thinking about all these millions of other things and worrying. If I'm drinking this coffee, I'd be thinking about the coffee. If I would be playing with my nephew, I'd be playing. Whereas before, I'd be drinking this coffee, but in my head, I'd be like, and I just couldn't enjoy life. Life didn't exist for me. So and it was such a short period, but it actually led to such a permanent change in my neurology that I now actually, if I see somebody that's extremely affected and therapy isn't working, I actually say to them, maybe go see a psychiatrist first. And I really like that you brought up postpartum, because I think what's a really underspoken about topic is when you have a baby, it's the most beautiful, amazing thing in the world. And you love them so painfully, like you love them so deeply. But that experience can only be felt when you've had a good childhood. And you've got this support network. So when a baby comes into our family, there's like 50 different people looking after the baby and so excited and happy and stuff like that. But there's some people who were never modeled love, who have no emotional support, and they genuinely think, if I'm not alive, this baby will die. I've got no mum, I've got no dad, I've got no sisters, I've got no one to support it. And if I fuck up, this entire baby's ruined. Imagine that pressure on one human being when really children are supposed to be raised by countless members of family.
Right.
They're supposed to be raised by like a tribe of 10.
Right.
One person solely responsible who's also been traumatized. Imagine the pain. And imagine the thoughts where they can go to you, like, okay, if this baby falls and dies, like what? It's so whereas when you've got a family network, it's like, how would the baby fall? There's about 50 people looking at it. Yeah?
Right.
So the trauma that goes through mothers who have been hurt in their childhood and now have to raise another human being when nobody modeled them love is so damaging for them. And they're not even free to talk about it, because then you look like a bad mom.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you look like you're supposed to be the happiest. Be grateful. There's people trying for a baby for 10 years.
Oh yeah,
this
I got
sort
that
of
a lot.
stuff. And it's like, but I don't choose these feelings.
Right.
Yeah?
I got a lot of I would tell Oliver, my husband, I would say, I'm feeling very alone. He'd be like, but everyone loves you. And I hated when he said that, because I was like, well, everyone's asking about the baby. And that really bothered me. I remember that everyone's like, how is she? Or I would walk into a room and people would just be like, oh my God, show us the baby. And it's like, I had the pain from my trauma. I had pain from my C-section. I had pain in my mind and my pain in my body. And I was doing everything to just kind of survive to make her the happiest. But it felt like everybody was focusing on her, which I think also nobody talks about that. It's like, well, where's the baby? And it's like, what about the mom?
But again, I hate that everything boils down to childhood. But when you have a mum and dad that loves you deeply, when people then start loving your child, you see it as a reflection of their love for you. So you see it as, oh, you love my baby, you must love me so much.
Oh, see, I don't see it.
It goes in that direction when you've been loved. But when you haven't been loved, everything is snatching love from you. You see everything as snatching love from you.
My God, I'm going to remember that forever. That's so true.
It's a through you process. Why would I care about your baby if I didn't love you so much? Think about how much I love my brother's baby and this, that, and the. I would never love a stranger's baby. It's a reflection of how much I love you. But when you haven't been loved as a child through your parents, you see love going somewhere else as snatch. So sometimes women get jealous of their husband's connection with their child, or husbands might get jealous of a child's connection. But really, when you're full, when you've been given love by your parents, you see it as is passing down the love. Right. But when you haven't been giving that love, it's snatching the love from you. It's snatching. So you're almost always seeing love like some people are thieving love from you, right, rather than pouring love into you because of childhood, when your parents, unfortunately.
It's all stemming from there. And that's why we're focusing here on sharing the message of doing the inner work, doing the hard work. It's so worth it. Seeing people like you, I mean, you're a blessing in this kind of world where there's so many variables that can just make everything we're already feeling so much more intense.
Yeah.
So if you're not doing the inner work to be a little bit more self-aware to see it, then the trail of self-sabotage that somebody
it's what it does to the child. It makes the child its own killer. The child is literally murdering themselves. It's a slow suicide when you don't love them. So they find a way to kill themselves on a daily basis, either by the way that they're thinking, by the food that they're eating, by the substances they're taking, or the partners they're choosing. And that's why we as human beings owe it to children to give them that, just a head start. And I get a lot of hate online, a lot, especially from single mothers and stuff like that, because I talk a lot about the importance of children being loved. And sometimes I can see mothers deprive children of their fathers when they're healthy fathers, not when they're abusive, even when they're healthy, just as a form of punishment. And I get so much backlash and so much hate. But the reason I do that is I've never ever come across a client that has had two really loving parents and is then engaging in a slow suicide. It doesn't happen. It's only when either one or both have hurt them in ways that they can't even articulate, but their body keeps score of it. So they start becoming masochists, either emotionally or physically. And I always find it comes from family and comes from mum and dad. So that's why I just think, forget the child. Let me teach parents, because then I will have no clients. One day, inshallah, God willing, we'll live in a world where there'll be no clients if we fix parents. But they don't want to have that conversation.
What is something you would say to parents? Obviously, there's so many things that you could say, but if you were to say there's one thing that you really, really can focus on as a parent to try to make your child feel the word you used, full.
Yeah, I would say, you know what it is? The first 3 years is a huge, huge investment for you. If you invest well in them in the first 3 years, I promise you, you don't have to worry about them so much after that. So in those first 3 years, every emotion they experience, validate it. When they cry, you soothe. When they smile, you smile back. When they are angry, you allow them to be angry, but you soothe them and calm them down. You attune yourself to their emotions. Literally, you validate and experience those emotions. You don't punish them for having emotions at such an early age. They're just babies. And then what you'll find is that child starts to trust you. It starts to learn, mom loves me, dad loves me, people are loving. Then what happens is they make good decisions for themselves in the future. They naturally work harder in school. They make good friends. They don't make bad friends because anyone that's mean to them, it's unfamiliar. So they make good choices. And then when it comes to partners, they'll only be with nice partners because anyone who's horrible, it's weird to them. But when we neglect them in the first few years, what happens is they learn to isolate. And they don't trust people and they don't trust the process, then they go from one sabotage after the other, and you'll create a teenager that you can't stand and an adult that you can't trust with their own life. So just invest in the first couple of years.
Wow, that's incredibly enlightening and something that we can definitely make a reel out of.
Inshallah.
So someone else will find you from this. I just can envision.
But you know what the problem is? This is a problem I really find is I talk a lot of calm, emotional stuff and a lot of like controversial relationship stuff. And what goes viral is the nonsense.
Really?
What goes viral is usually the nonsense. If I talk about cheating men and cheating women and like rich men and gold diggers and all this stuff, and that tends to go viral. If I sit there and talk to you about how to nurture and love a baby, because it's
do the inner work
and do the inner work, it's skip, which I understand. You know, we're living in a world where it's entertainment rather than improvement is what we're focusing on. Micro. So I understand that, but it just makes me sad because then it's like when you think of Sadia, you'll think of that girl that always talks about guys cheating or girls cheating, and it's like actually no, that's not what I really talk about, and it's not what I care about either. What I care about is why we're selecting partners like that and why we're using sex as a coping mechanism. Where is the pain?
Right.
Because sex becomes a coping mechanism, affairs become a coping mechanism, so let's undo it. But obviously social media is sensationalized and they kind of pick on those things.
But it is adaptive, and that's what I believe, because it's the same thing with me. I'm so sick of seeing similar content constantly. But in the end, even though the cheating and the reel that I found you with didn't relate to me, I still knew, you know what the hell you're talking about. And we're here now to make it where we can hopefully get people to listen. Because honestly, I needed this conversation so much, so many times in my life. And that's what I'm hoping. Like, it's kind of in a podcast because people aren't watching, you know, they're going to listen later. I feel like this is such a safe place to be vulnerable with you. So I'm so glad that we're doing this.
And I'm glad we're strangers because I've got no pre-existing idea. I haven't met your baby or anything like that. So it's good for me to kind of go into it with a blank slate. Then I can't say, oh, but she knows my husband. It's purely, this is what trauma does to us. And people think they're so unique. They always say to me, oh, she thinks she knows it, or people think like everybody's different. No, we're not. We're really not. Trauma really has really predictable effects on human beings. I can almost tell you some of the behaviors that you might show with your husband. You might do like over-checking when he's last online, like when he's last seen, or why hasn't he called me? Some of the verbal kind of abuse sometimes that might come out when you're triggered. It's predictable because trauma is predictable, because human beings are designed to be loved. And when we're not loved, we go down a particular path.
I wanted to ask you, so if I was your client and I did tell you like what I've told you so far, I'm so scared for Callie, my daughter, to have any issues in the future because her dad's not around a lot. And I'm very scared to say it around him because he constantly feels so guilty. He absolutely adores her, loves her so much, checks on her. He does all the due diligence and more. But the nature of his job is sometimes he's gone for a month now. She hasn't seen him in a month.
Yeah, a long time.
It's a long time. I mean, she's even a different baby since the last time he was here. So I worry about her.
Him coming home once a month, he'll still love her more than any other man on the planet. Impossible to tell me otherwise. Yeah, this is the most a human being can love somebody, is a healthy father. So here's what really happens with children. As much as they are, vulnerable, they're also very resilient. And what happens is they learn the mum's energy as well. So what happens if dad is going away and coming back, dad is going away and coming back, but mum is consistent and mum is reminding them that dad loves them.
Yeah.
They form, even if I just say to you now, could you imagine ketchup on ice cream? Your brain will start to experience what ketchup on ice cream would taste like, because when we're told something, our brain actually starts to experience it.
Right.
So when you tell Callie, dad loves you so much, he's gone to work because he wants to give you a good life. You know that holiday? Dad's just going to do a few things to make sure we can go on it. Yeah. Or dad has done that. When I go shopping with dad's car, dad bought you this. You keep him alive. So what happens is she glorifies him in his absence and he soothes her when he's in his presence.
Wow. Okay.
And that's how you keep the connection. But taking the child away, unfortunately, the bond between a child and a loving parent can never be replaced. It can never be replaced. So by removing that completely, you traumatize them way worse.
Yeah.
Whereas when you teach them patience and reassurance, dad is coming home, dad loves you, dad is going to be there, don't worry about it. That child feels even more important because she learns trust. She learns that separation is not neglect.
Right.
Whereas if you then took her away, she would learn that separation is abandonment. But if you remind her dad's coming back, he's coming back, he's coming back, and he consistently comes back. It's a bit like when you drop them to play school. The first day, they'll be crying their eyes out. Second day, they're like, bye, bitch, and they go straight in. They could care less because they trust you. You're going to come back. That's what you do with father figures.
Wow, incredible. I'm gonna listen to this episode more than anyone else. I'm gonna repeat it onto
No, inshallah. That's how it works.
You're amazing. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
I wrote down some stuff while I was doing my makeup. I wrote down some questions. So we usually do this as part of the episode. So I'm gonna fire them at you and take your time. And so is being triggered a toxic trait?
It's a toxic reaction, but not a toxic trait. Just think about what a trigger is. Like when you pull the trigger on a gun, it's a very disproportionate reaction to whatever the person's done. Yeah, it's pulling the trigger and it's a really disproportionate reaction. So that's what trigger really does. It unleashes a weapon. But being triggered is not necessarily a toxic trait. It's a human response to a pain. Yeah. If I had a burn on my arm and you push past it, I'm like, that's a trigger. It's not really my fault, but you have to bear in mind that person didn't know I had the burn. They didn't do it on purpose. So we can all have triggers, but what's toxic is when we don't communicate what our triggers are and we don't communicate how to soothe the triggers. So a trigger might be, for me, long separation without speaking. That's a trigger for me. If I don't say anything and I pretend I'm cool about it and then explode when he finally does call me, that's toxic. Right. But if I communicate and I say, babe, I really miss you and you go too long without me, I get anxious. Please just check in. Oh, sorry, babe, I'll do that and more often. And I communicate my triggers and I give them the benefit of the doubt that they're not trying to trigger me. Then it's not toxic. It's just a human response. So you just have to communicate it and give them the antidote. This is what to do to soothe me. Teach them how to soothe you. But,
I need to get better at that.
Yeah,
to be able
sometimes we don't even know what soothes us.
Right.
But then we realize it when we hug them and kiss them. We're like, oh, I feel better now. But you've been so mean to them, they don't want to hug you and kiss you. Yeah? So what you do is before you get to that mean stage, you say, babe, I need connection. I need, are you okay? Just do it rather than waiting for them to reach out to you.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. I can ask you questions for the rest of my life. So I think what we've gathered is actually there is hope that people with childhood trauma can go on to have healthy and happy lives, but it requires the message we're sending to people who are listening right now.
It requires effective communication.
Effective communication.
Learn your triggers, learn where they come from, and then teach your partner how to soothe you and select a partner that won't ignite your pain. Select, which you've done, thank goodness. Select a partner that will not trigger you. So when you have a trigger of abandonment, the worst thing you can do is choose a partner who's sleeping around in the club, addicted to drugs. Worst thing you can do. Best thing you can do is that simple, homely guy, but you probably will be triggered by him because it will feel so unfamiliar. But you select wisely and you teach people how to cope with the pain and how to soothe you. And if they respect your boundaries, perfect. If they can't do it, don't be mad at them. Not everybody is a physician. Not everybody is a psychologist. Don't be mad at them, but recognize that at least you tried.
Okay. I'm noting this down right now. So this is, I'm not off topic, but this is just, I'm going to pick your brain.
Yeah.
Why do you think that in 2023, and this is a study I read, why do you think that in 2023, it is said that people are finding it very hard to stay together as we move closer to 2023? Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Because all the programming for the last 10 years has been designed to teach us how to break up. It's been designed to pit men and women against each other, to fear commitment, to glorify single life, to kind of think, okay, this is how you move on, this is how you play hard to get, this is how you get someone to sleep with you. You have created the groundwork for divorce and none of the groundwork for marriage. You don't see people teaching them that this is how to communicate your pain, or this is how to select a partner correctly. You say, this is how you trick a guy into that, this is how you take a girl, and this is how you get her to sleep with you, and this is how you get her money. We've glorified sex so much, and we have almost demonized marriage that we are now programmed to simply keep moving on to the next and finding alternatives. And combined with the plentiful alternatives we have now through technology, it's a recipe for disaster.
It makes total sense. There's just too much. My single friends are like so scared of going out into the world because they see so many options for men. So they just say, well, what's the point?
Yeah,
and
what's
I
the
hear
point?
it all
They're
the
going
time.
to cheat on me anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I might as well just marry for money, or I might as well just do that.
Right.
Because they've given up hope on, and I'm not saying they're wrong. I can understand why people give up hope on it, but it didn't come overnight. It started from maybe 2007 when Facebook first got invented, then 2012 when Tinder came around. It's been a long work, but if the devil was there designing divorce, he's done a great job.
I love that. Yeah. The devil is literally designing divorce.
Hats off. Yeah, hats off to him. The devil is patient.
Yeah. Okay, well, this is about the UAE.
Yes.
And how do you feel the UAE is changing towards their look on mental health awareness, or are they even changing?
You know what? I have found it surprisingly very warm towards mental health. The thing is with the UAE, what's unique about them is that they're the best at everything. So when they find something, they're going to be the best at it. Yeah. So when they find that there's a new trend or new something, whether it's to do with healthcare, whether it's to do with mental health, whether it's to do with restaurants, whether it's podcast studios, they'll do it the best. So give them a year or so, it will be the hub for mental health. I couldn't be more grateful for the opportunities the UAE has presented to me, except for the parking fines. I have so many.
I'm getting one too as we speak.
So if anyone's watching and wants to forgive me, then but other than that, it's I cannot be more grateful for the city I live in.
Yeah, I have massive hope as well for the UAE in this region.
It's so innovative. Yeah. So what happens is the government sees what people like and what people need and thinks, okay, well, Habibi will do it the best.
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
It. So it's that simple.
It's such a blessing living here
Praise
for that reason
God,
as well. I'm going to end with one question that's going to kind of, hopefully we can get you on for part 2, because I could literally talk to you till the end of my life.
It's always my pleasure. It's always my pleasure.
Thank you so much. It's just unreal to be surrounded by an expert like you with this insurmountable knowledge. It's just amazing, honestly. I mean, adopt me, please.
Oh, of course.
So we're going to end with one question. What makes relationships thrive? If you were to narrow it down and just give us a little piece right now to kind of just get us through the day.
Emotional attunement. And what I mean by that is your pain is my pain. Your happiness is my happiness. Your sadness is my sadness. You become emotionally attuned to your partner. And then what happens is hurting them becomes hurting you. Loving them becomes loving you. So when you find a partner and you invest time and energy to be attuned to their emotions, and also do this with your children, what will then happen is the relationship thriving will be a natural consequence, and it will also become a selfish act, because making them happy is a form of making you happy.
Wow, amazing. Oh, you are so incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being so vulnerable and open. I really, really appreciate it. I'm not even this open about these things.
I'm usually not. Honestly, I feel very comfortable speaking with you, and I think the world needs to see so much more of you. I want to see more of you, and I hope that you do come back.
Inshallah.
Pray
for me. Pray for me. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.